everyone has the product analytics playbook in front of them. If you can open up to page 31, this is going to be a little bit interactive. It is a summit after all. What you'll actually see there is a graph of the user lifecycle framework and the different user states. And I just want to poll the audience really quickly. So there should be new, current, power, resurrected, and churned. And I'd love to know here in the audience how many teams that you're on can actively or currently track all of the different states of these users. If so, raise your hand. Next month? Yes. Okay. So this is something that's a really good framework as well to take away, to start thinking about users in those different behavioral cohorts and trying to put strategies and tactics in place to moving people into those different areas. Another thing that's really important is to understand as a company, where are you focused, right? Or as a product team, where are you focused? If you're a newer product, you're probably on the acquisition side of things, right? If you're more established product, you're probably trying to figure out how to turn current users into power users. So it's a really powerful framework that all of you can take home and start thinking about with your team. And I am now going to introduce our next speaker. So very, very excited to introduce Dan. He leads growth and analytics at HubSpot. How many people have heard of HubSpot? It's the local hero here in Boston. So we're very excited to have them as a customer. Before that, actually, Dan was at PwC and Microsoft, and then started his own company called Prepwork, which was acquired by HubSpot, and that's how he's been there. So please give him a round of applause and welcome Dan to the stage.
Thank you. Hey, everybody. All right. So I want to talk today about my experiences using behavioral analytics tools. I've gone through a lot of really, really, really painful transitions. And so if there's one thing I hope everyone can take away from this is that please don't make the same mistakes that I did, because I have really gnarly scars to show for it. Okay, so I'm sure everyone knows HubSpot, but we now have we're over 1,700 employees. We have over 35,000 paying customers. I don't think we've said how many free users we have. We have in the hundreds of thousands. We IPO'd in 2014, and I think our ARR is at like 350 million. So we're a big company now, but when I joined in 2013, we were much smaller. We had probably 10,000 customers. We had 0 free weekly active users. Our ARR was like 50 million, I think. We were a private company. I think we had like 400 employees. So like vastly different company than we are today. Kind of gives you a sense of like the evolution that we've gone through and how it impacted what we were doing. So when I joined, this is what people are using for behavioral analytics. I'm just curious, how many people are using this today? They just have some SQL. I'm just curious. Wow, everyone else, how many people are using any sort of behavioral analytics? Okay, wow, so interesting. So we were using SQL. And the real dirty secret, I'm sure everyone who's used these things, is that no one uses it. I mean, of the people who have these SQL systems that have your data in it, how many people regularly query it? Okay, how many people on all your teams regularly query it? Yeah, so do your designers know SQL? Do your user researchers know SQL? How are they going to find who to query and who to talk to? Are they really going to learn SQL? No effing way. And this is what was happening at HubSpot. It was really we had the data. We could be data driven, but every time you had a question, it's like, do you even know the host name? Do you know the username? Do you know the password? Do you know the table schema? Do you know the names of events? Like, it's really hard to go do all this stuff. So if you're using these tools, I'd be honest with yourself, and you're not really using them. Okay. And so when I joined, there were some teams using this, but we were just launching our next product line, which was the sales products. And so now we have hundreds of thousands of people using our free CRM and our free tools for salespeople. But at the time, we just had our marketing product. And so we got to start from scratch. And so one of the things we did is we used a behavioral analytics tool. And this is basically how I felt when I was exposed to it for the first time. It was just jaw dropping to me. This kind of stuff you could do. And now I honestly don't know how teams build stuff without these tools. I have a lot of friends in the tech community, and I ask them, "Are you using a behavioral analytics tool?" And they say no. And I want to flip the table over and go, "Are you kidding me? How do you know how many people are using your product? How do you know how many people, like what the distribution of usage is amongst your features? How do you know of the people that start a flow, how many complete it? When you release a new feature, how do you know whether it had any impact whatsoever other than talking to a handful of people? How do people do it? I don't know. They don't, which seems crazy to me. How do you, how many Steve Jobs can there be out there that know exactly what people should have? It just seems, and even he didn't know, right? So it just seems crazy to me that people think, well, I think this is what I should do, and I'll talk to a couple of customers, and that is representative of all of my customers. It seems crazy. So because I'm so animated and because I'm such a diehard when it comes to this stuff, the designers mocked up this of me. They call me Data Dan now. This is Data from Star Trek, and this is my face photoshopped on him, and it's really creepy, so I'll move away from the slide. But I totally buy into what Justin is saying. Like, every product team should be using this stuff, and if you aren't, I don't know what you're doing if you're not doing it. And there are tons of people at HubSpot that don't use data the way that I think they should, and I'm constantly pseudo yelling at them in our catch-up meetings, but I really do believe it at a deep level that I don't know how people aren't using these tools. Okay, so when I joined, we launched a whole bunch of our free sales products, our free CRM, and our free tools for individual salespeople. And we quickly grew it from something that didn't exist to a tool that had hundreds of thousands of weekly active users using it all the time. And so that we were really excited about that. And a lot of the people within the company started to see what we were doing and say, wow, I want to do the same thing. And so really quickly, as our users went up and we wanted to put more events into this system, our event volume skyrocketed. So as our users went up like this, so did the number of events we were sending into our system. And it got pretty pricey. And so we took a step back and said, whoa, this is kind of expensive. Are we sure we want to invest in this? And this is scar number one, where I wasn't involved in this decision, but I really wish I could go back in time and say, don't do it. We decided to build it for ourselves. And there were some good reasons here where we thought that we might want to launch some tool that would do some sort of analytics for our customers. And so we thought we'd solve it for ourselves, and then we could launch some feature once we'd kind of generalized it and got it right. And I can't tell you how painful this process has been. So even if you don't use a tool but you're thinking about it, there were some good arguments also. Like we're a big public company now. Big public companies, it's a competitive advantage. We should own our data. We don't want anyone else to own it. We have special, unique reports that we need to generate that no one else can generate, and that we're the only ones that can do it. So of course we're going to need to do it for ourselves. They're just not true. And so ultimately it was a huge failure. It was really painful. And not to say that, before I get on all the reasons why it didn't work, we had some kick-ass engineers working on our solution. They did a really good job building it too. I really liked the guy who built it. I'm still friends with him. He did a great job, but there were circumstances outside of his control that really contributed to it. So the guy who built it, he left HubSpot because we decided not to build a public-facing version of the tool that we had built. And so he got super fired up about building this thing, prototyping on HubSpot, and then releasing it to everybody. And when his mission was scaled back, he wasn't as interested in building this tool. So the team left, then we had to bring on a new team. They had to come up to speed. This was a challenge that we don't face as much. We do a whole bunch of interesting technology challenges, but the technology that they had built this on, Redshift, while it's great for some things, had a whole bunch of issues, and so the team had to come up to speed on those issues. While that was happening, a whole bunch more people started to instrument their apps onto our system. And so we had huge spikes in volume. And so, of course, we had reliability and scale issues. The team wasn't staffed sufficiently. It's hard to hire for these types of roles. Do you just have somebody you can throw at this kind of problem? You need to go recruit them and hire them. It's hard. We did migrate some data. Don't even get me started on data migrations. And then this is the other thing that I don't think people really think about, which you need to do. And so now I manage a team of data analysts, and the goal is to help the entire product team be more quantitative and leverage, not be purely quantitative, but have a balance between the quantitative and the qualitative. You need to teach people inside your company how to use this tool. If you focus exclusively on building the tool, who's going to teach the rest of the company how to use it? Are the engineers going to go around to all the other engineers and the designers and the user researchers and your marketers and teach them how to use the tool? I don't think so. And so, do you want to build a tool, or do you want to teach people how to build a tool? Right? These are hard problems. I still struggle with educating people on how to instrument events. It's hard. How do you get engineers to think about the future analysis that a PM or someone's going to want to do a couple of months from now, and they need to instrument it properly to be able to enable that kind of analysis? And so, the biggest thing is that we had this death spiral. We had a loss of confidence in the data. Once we had scale issues, the system got slow. It took a while to get your queries to run. We went into this death spiral where people lose confidence in the system, then they stop using it as much. And then there isn't as much data in the system to enable their analysis. So then it's like, ugh, why do I even go into that thing? People are going to badmouth parts of oh, this didn't work for me, or oh, this metric was wrong. They're going to tell somebody else, and then they're going to stop using it as well. So it's like, are you guys familiar with the phrase error between keyboard and chair, EBCAC? Even if there was an EBCAC issue, they would still blame it on the tool. So you're constantly fighting this battle. And so ultimately, a lot of people stopped using it. It got so bad that it bubbled up all the way to our exec team, and rightly so, our exec team was like, you guys can't tell us how many people use the product? What are you guys doing over there? You can't tell us these key questions that we have? How come the numbers keep changing? Why can't you give me a straight answer? And so because of that, we decided to do a look to see if we should continue to invest more resources in it or look to a vendor. And so that was, I think, like 2 years ago? 1 year ago? Yeah. And the biggest thing, I won't go through the whole thing. We looked at a whole bunch of different vendors, and obviously I'm a big fan of Amplitude, and we're using Amplitude today. And the two things that I really think about are the questions that we asked were, does it do what we need? Yes, we're a big special public company, and we want to do things so uniquely, but can you get by with what the tool offers? And for us, the key things as a B2B company, we don't care purely about users. So some of these consumer companies, they just care about individual users playing your game, and there's less of a concept of a team, of a company. But for a B2B company, you care about companies. Companies pay you money, not as much as individual users. And so we needed something that would allow us to do an analysis on companies, not just individuals. And so that was one of our key sticking points. We also wanted to have access to our data in Redshift clusters so we could ETL it throughout the organization and use it. So that allowed us to do everything custom that we wanted to do. And solved all of our other issues. And then the other thing we did is we just did a cost-benefit analysis. So we're all product leaders. Let's say we're going to staff up a team. We're going to staff up a team. We're going to build something like this. How much does a good software engineer who can do all this stuff with Redshift and Kafka and persist a lot of data, how much is an engineer like that going to cost? $250. Okay. Does that seem reasonable? All in, salary, stock, benefits, candy, Skittles, soda. And all right, so how many engineers do you think you need? At least 3, right? You need a really good back-end person. You need a really good front-end person. You can't just be like, oh, we'll just take some jQuery front-end libraries and charts and slap them together, and boom, we got this amazing system. It's hard. So you get at least $750,000 just on engineers, and then you're probably going to need someone to at least help them figure out what they should build. Maybe a little bit of a product manager. And then you got to pay for this thing. So, you're looking at $1 million, I think, if you truly want to build a tool. And so we said, do we want to build a tool that's crappier than what we can get on the market, Or do we want to take these awesome engineers and have them build something else that can generate more than $1 million in improvements to the product? And when you look at it that way, it's you have to have some pretty complex requirements in order to justify building it in-house. You got to be Facebook, right? And even that, I bet their tools are crap, and their team's super frustrated about it. So ultimately, those were some of the key things that we thought about. And when you look at it that way, like, I don't know why you'd ever build it. Unless there is some titanic shift in the technology industry that makes it easier to run all these queries simultaneously, ingest all this data, I don't see myself ever wanting to build this kind of a tool again. And there's no way in hell I'd join a company that said, oh, no, we're sticking with our custom thing. No way. So I would say if you are faced with this situation, some questions to ask yourself of the skills required to build it, the team, can you recruit all these people? It's so hard to teach people how to use these tools. Like, there's a reason that I just send a ton of people this book. It's so hard. It's so hard, especially for someone that doesn't come from a quantitative background. That is a job in and of itself, and that is what me and my team does. Like, that's all we do. Ultimately, a lot of the reports that we thought we wanted to do, we didn't end up even using. We built all these fancy reports in our custom tool. We never used them. It's like, what's the point of spending $1 million on a tool that's not so great and that people aren't even going to use? All right. Now that I've gone through my horrible experience with the building versus buying, there's like one thing that we always said we wanted to build in our internal tool, which I don't think we're ever going to get to, and that's behavioral cohorts. I don't know if you guys have used it, but I'm just like in love with this feature. And I don't think Amplitude does a good enough job of like really selling this feature, because I love it. And it's one of the examples of why I'm so happy that we made the decision that we did. So going back to my SQL example, this would be a really complicated SQL query to write. There's like group by statements and having statements. Like, a lot of our PMs don't even know how to write a group by statement in SQL. There's no way they know having. Like window functions and left joins and inner selects. Like, this is a complicated query. This is fairly simple in their interface. And so you can just get a list of users that have done any criteria you want in any time range. And so it's really powerful to be able to say, oh, user researcher, you want to know who's used this feature so you can ask them some feedback? Boom, here's your list. You can go get the answer to that in literally 2 seconds. Even if you don't have a very specific answer or a question about what you're asking for, you might say, are there easier ways to create these cohorts of people that you want to follow up with? You can create the cohorts in the charts. Like, there's no way we were going to have built this in our charts, of the ability to click in and say, of the people that did not last, who were active in month 0 but did not make it to month 1, I want a list of those users. There's no way we were going to add this. And so it's super easy just to click into it and say, yep, I want a list of these people. And I want to follow up with them. I want my PMs to follow up with them. I want my user researchers to follow up with them. I want the design team to follow up with them to understand, why did you stop using our product? And you can do it in all the charts. It's super easy to say, create a cohort of this group of people. You can do it in funnels, retention charts. I'm constantly berating people inside HubSpot to use this feature, because I don't think people are even aware of it. And we have like 200 people using Amplitude on a weekly basis. We have a lot of people using it. The other thing is so cool is that once you have these cohorts of users, you can compare their behavior. So this is, I blurred out all the stuff, but like people using our CRM, the blue is our entire user base. And so we have this huge drop off for one of our features. The green is a cohort of users that do a certain behavior that I was very interested in. And you can see the conversion rate from getting from step A to step B is so much higher with this behavioral cohort of users. And so now my question is to the PM, what are you doing? What business metric, what goal are you setting for the team to get more people to try and get them into this cohort? If they need to install something to get into the green cohort, push people into this green cohort as hard as you can without forcing them, and do you continue to see good results? And so this is a good example of this is a behavior that we know is representative of success in our product. And when I can show you the charts, right? It's not like, oh, I talked to 3 customers and they love it. It's people are more successful when going from A to B if they have done this thing. And the nice thing is you can look at it over time. Like, would you want to take a conversion rate from the blue line to the green line? Like, who wouldn't? And it's so much easier to get a team, the Spotify tribes, and I can't even remember all the analogies here, but it's so much easier to get a team to rally behind it when you can say, let's get the blue line to look like the green line. Let's get more people into that cohort. And it's so nice to be able to say, oh, we shipped something, and the rate is going to spike. And you can see it, right? You can see the impact you're having, which is so much harder when you're not using anything or not querying your SQL database. And it's so easy. In any chart, you can say, I want to look at these events, and then I just want to look at it for all. Right now, I'm looking at it for portals, which is our concept of a company. And I also want to look at it for a cohort that is whatever I define. And so on any chart, on any question you have, you can say, well, let me look at it for all users, and let me look at it for these users in this cohort. Or let me look at it by geography, right? As easy as you can segment any chart by a characteristic of the person or the company that took that action, like geography, language, size, industry, you can also segment it by people in a behavioral cohort. You can see the difference in those things. So it's just so powerful that, and the issue is I don't think people naturally think to ask these questions. And so if you can give them a tool and prompt them to go down this path, they're going to build such better products. The experience for your users is going to be so much better. So with that, I think happy to answer any questions anyone has. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So just in case anyone didn't hear, the question is, how do you, once you say like, okay, I want the blue and the green, how do you figure out what is the green and what you can do to get people to go from the blue to the green? Is that fair? Yeah. Okay. So I feel like this kind of process was just impossible before. And so you might have this question, and then you might go, I don't want to write the SQL to do this. And so you're just not going to do it. And so you might talk to a couple of customers. But when you have the data, you can then, there are a couple awesome features that will help tell you what these key actions are that are indicative of people being in this cohort. And then honestly, it's a mix of quantitative and qualitative. But in 30 minutes of just playing around with some of the charts in here, you can have a really strong idea of what things are leading to people being in this green line in this cohort, and a lot of hypotheses as to what you can do to help nudge everyone to be in that cohort. And so you're definitely going to want to mix some qualitative in there at some point, but the quantitative helps point your teams in the right direction, I think. Yeah.
How do you avoid the sort of correlation causation fallacy here where, maybe yes, the people in the power cohorts that you've defined look really awesome, but it turns out that there's some underlying behavior, some latent behavior that is really what's driving their value and not the thing that you've defined.
Totally. That's why I'm a big fan of testing stuff as quickly as possible, the minimum viable test. Let's get some more people to do that, and let's see if their retention rates increase, if they do the things that we want. So just test. I think a lot of the engineers I work with are like, oh, geez, I don't know how I do that. And I would just do a smoke test for some of this stuff. You could, like, what's the minimum thing you need to build, and then measure the result on those people. It's oftentimes a lot less engineering effort than people think. Yeah.
So one thing you mentioned was that you had to get company into your data model. So what I saw here was essentially just kind of unique users. I wondered, did you have to span the gap into like financial systems or something else to kind of pull the data and define your cohort in terms of any user within company X or something like that?
So this is the, and so technically you could do some of this stuff. So I used a different vendor before, and I was a big fan of theirs. So I love all the technology in this space, but the thing that was a deal breaker for us was this thing right here says performed by, and this is where you can say users. For us, a portal is a company. So we wanted to be able to change any chart to say, how many daily active users do I have? And you switch one thing and it just changes to daily active companies. And all this is a property on an event that says what the company ID is, and then we can literally change any chart, segmentation chart, funnel chart, retention chart. So it's operating not on a user basis, but on a, for us, portal, but for everyone else, an account. And it's just passing in an extra attribute at event time, or hitting any of their other APIs to be able to set what those are. Hi.
Hi. So here's a recent anecdote. We were redesigning a feature, and the lead designer said, I talked to 5 users. I know exactly what I need to change. Go away. Okay. Now what? No, apparently in the UX community, there's a lot of thought leaders that say you talk to 6 people and you surface most of the usability issues, and this whole behavior data, large people, blah, blah, blah. Don't care about that.
So I'm a bit, you only need to talk to a small number of people before you start hearing the same things. And that's what they're saying, right? But I think the bigger question is, okay, like how many, let's say you have 100,000 users of whatever you're building. So you talk to 5 out of 100,000. Are those 5 representative of the entire sample? Oh no! So in all these meetings, I think I think you can easily come across as aggressive, and people can get so defensive of their processes. They're like, "Why are you telling me how to do design research?" About like all this stuff. And I think you could just want to ask simple questions like, "How did you pick those 5 people? Are they representative? What are the things that lead you to believe that the feedback from these 5 people are going to scale to the entire user base, or that those things that you start to hear over and over again are going to be the things that drive the impact we want to see?" And so then it would just be a question of, how'd you pick those 5? Did you just pick them randomly? And this is where this stuff is so helpful, is you could say, well, why don't you talk to people who aren't using it? Do you want to build for the really engaged 1% of your user base that's the loudest? Or do you want to build for the people? We have this problem at HubSpot, is we constantly refine the features that we have, and I don't think we speak to the people that don't use the features. And it's so much harder to get that feedback. Yeah.
Like the other part is, you sort of already mentioned it, you can try, sometimes if they think they have 5 that seem reasonable, you can try a minimal viable product and just then test it out and get some data back.
Yeah.
Because at some point, you sometimes do get a feature that's not something you have now, you're not getting data on. You talk to some customers, they think it's a really cool idea, well, then build something small. And then at least get some data about other ones. I'm not saying it's perfect. That is some work, but I'm just saying, if you're having that discussion,
Yeah,
get some data.
I'm all for building small things and testing them, but I think you should at least you should develop a culture where you can ask questions and say, great, I love that you're doing what you're doing, but can I ask you how you're doing, how you make those decisions, and is there an opportunity to help find an even better set of 5 people that will give you better insight?
I mean, I often talk with industry and things like that, trying to figure targeting certain, who you're targeting why.
Yep.
So this will be recorded, right? I can play it back to the UX people?
I don't know. Any other questions? Any other time?
Yeah, I think we're at time. So what I would recommend is, if you have more questions, try to grab Dan, or we can collect them at the end. But once again, can everyone please give Dan a round of applause?